Have you ever wondered what your dreams mean? Join us in Dream School at thisjungianlife.com and find out. Jung wrote, "Dreams are a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul."
Dream School is a unique, self-paced online program you can start at any time that unlocks access to your inner world. Our 12-month program provides the support, knowledge, and guidance you need to reach within, decipher your personal dream code, and harness it to optimize your life. By enrolling, you'll join an affirming community of fellow travelers, each pursuing a unique quest.
And it's fun. Join us on an adventure to wholeness and healing through understanding your dreams. Go to thisjungianlife.com and click on Dream School. You'll be taken to our secure checkout. Once you join, you'll get immediate access to our first 3 modules. You can get started right away. We look forward to seeing you there.
Welcome to This Jungian Life. 3 good friends and Jungian analysts, Lisa Marciano, Deborah Stewart, and Joseph Lee, invite you to join them for an intimate and honest conversation that brings a psychological perspective to important issues of the day.
I'm Lisa Marciano, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Philadelphia.
I'm Joseph Lee, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
I'm Deborah Stewart, a Jungian analyst on Cape Cod.
Welcome, everyone, from the Chicago Humanities Festival. We're happy you could make it. It's been a bit of a long road getting us all here and together, so it's a wonderful time and experience to share with you. Today we're going to be talking with David and Clarice, whose new album, titled Archetype, is particularly interesting to the 3 of us as Jungian analysts. C.G. Jung championed the role of archetypes in the structure of the human psyche and how those universal patterns underlie all human experience. So we're very interested to hear from David and collaborator Clarice. How did you land on the idea of archetypes as something to champion, something to bring forward?
Well, first of all, thanks, and it's really wonderful to be here with everybody. Clarice, actually, you brought the idea of archetypes to the group that I'm a part of, Third Coast Percussion. I can say that what fascinated us straight away when that idea was brought up as a sort of an inspiration for a collaborative project, it was that these are universal ideas. And so as inspiration for a musical project, it felt like something that could be relevant in so many different ways to so many different people. Maybe, Clarice, you could talk a little bit about how you and your father, Sérgio, kind of came to the idea of centering this project around the idea of archetypes.
Yes, of course. It's very nice to be here. My father, Sérgio Assad, he is a composer, guitarist, and I love to work with him. So previously, we just had this idea to work on a project, and we're tossing around ideas, and he said, let's work with myths and legends, and we are both from Brazil, so of course he's thinking about stories that have to do with Brazilian legends and the characters that only probably Brazilian people know about. And I wanted really badly to collaborate with Third Coast Percussion on this project and connect with a much larger audience and people, not only with them like as performers and collaborators, but also imagine these characters in their own minds as they please, and not force them to learn about a character that is only known to me and maybe my father, that we care about because we have emotional ties to them, right? And so I thought, wait a minute, archetypes. The more I learned about archetypes, whenever I could find, at least online at first, the more I got excited about it. It's like a rabbit hole. And then, as David said, they also got excited about the idea as it was presented to them, and here we are.
Can you tell me a little bit about that rabbit hole? What did you learn, and what was that like for you?
You know, I don't have a background in Carl Jung's work, so I'm officially like an armchair Jungian, I suppose.
There's no shame in that. So are we, honestly.
What struck me was the obvious ways that archetypes, in my mind, bring people together and create a shared experience, and the ways in which archetypes are interesting to sort of subvert. Just to say a little bit about the project, what Clarice and Sérgio dreamed up was taking 12 of the Jungian archetypes and writing a piece of music for each of those 12 pre-selected archetypes. 12 feeling like, I suppose, a nice round number and a good concert length, album length of archetype material. When you came to us, Clarice, you and your father had, I think, written a couple of them and sort of decided on a couple you were going to write. And then my colleagues and I in Third Coast Percussion got really excited, and we decided to write, or we asked if we could write a piece ourselves. And so we sort of kind of took dibs on different archetypes that we wanted to write. And that was how my rabbit hole began, because, I looked at the 12 that we had pre-selected, and the one that was the most interesting to me was the lover. I wish I knew more about what Jung sort of characterized as the lover as an archetype, but I knew immediately in my mind what that word brings to mind, and I wanted to highlight a different aspect of what it means to be a lover in the sense of like someone who loves someone else. Anyway, I suppose what I'm saying is that to me, the archetypes are both interesting for what they represent, but also they were fun to sort of like as a way to sort of subvert expectations a little bit.
David, I'm curious, since you kind of laid that out, what was your first association to the idea of the lover? And then you rebelled against that in some fashion and decided you were going to go in a unique direction. What was the tension of those two concepts?
Well, when I saw that word, or when I see that word, the lover, I think about romantic heroes from stories, myths, and legends, romantic, often ill-fated or overly dramatic, tragic love stories, Romeo and Juliet or Tristan and Isolde or whatever it might be. To me, I think it's not only unfair, but I think it's dangerous and unhealthy for people to think about human companionship in that way. And to me, loving someone in the sense of like a life partner, to me is about understanding that you're not going to be the same, and that you're going to love the differences and line up in the moments where it really matters. You and your dad are moving at one speed, and me are moving at one speed, and Sean from Third Coast, and we're moving simultaneously through the piece. And the harmonies change at about the same time, but not exactly. And the rhythmic language is a little bit confusing because it's two different speeds happening at the same time. But all of the key moments line up, and the piece works, and it is harmonious in spite of this like underlying disharmony. That was kind of where I went with mine, which was fun.
Fun and hopeful.
Yeah.
that the two disharmonious streams can actually come together in one composition and create something interesting and beautiful. It's wonderful when that does happen in our relationships, and we all know how these can go.
And there is something very Jungian about holding the opposites, holding differences. And it's practically a refrain in Jung worlds of, to hold the tension of the opposites, and that then something new can happen. So it's not just that you have to hang in there and kind of white knuckle your way through it, but that the holding of the tension allows the third thing that you don't really think about to happen. It emerges. And I'm also appreciating this dipping down into the mythical layer to draw upon archetypal images for inspiration, because we all have that in common. It's common to all of humankind. It's such an exciting venture that you've embarked on.
I love you bringing up the way that opposites come together and can create something new and unprecedented. And that comes from the transcendent function, or that Jung noticed there was something in the human soul that if we could bear the tension would bring something together, a symbol, a dream, a piece of artwork to resolve the tension in the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so apropos of so many creative projects.
Certainly. I'd say certainly this project, I mean, it was so fun working together and also just seeing the different ways that different people interpreted their own archetypes. Clarice, I wonder, could you pick one of yours and sort of describe your thought process? I have one that I want you to talk about, but I think you should.
I think the first one, the one that opens the concert and the album, which is a little bit staged in a way that I was thinking, the way that I imagined it. First time I saw Third Coast perform, I was so mesmerized by how they move around on stage from instrument to instrument. It's just so visually incredible. It sounds amazing. It also looks amazing. So I wanted to take advantage of that. And I thought, out of those 12 archetypes, can I use, I thought the rebel would be the best one. First thing that came to my mind was a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the rebel. It's rebelling against something, and it just starts with one person, but it needs companion, basically. So you can't really start a revolution alone. So David is the one who walks on stage by himself, completely alone, and just goes at the drums and just improvises like a madman. It's like as if like we're going to start a rock concert.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like throwing a tantrum by the drums. What is the archetype for rebel in South America? And I think, Che Guevara is what comes to my mind. It's an archetype of rebellious personality. And then so it came to be that we follow his lead one by one and go to our instruments and start playing the piece. So I guess that was the first thing that I thought about when we began writing this project.
David, is that the one you wanted her to talk about?
It wasn't, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll get to the other one, right? I mean, I love hearing you talk about the rebel, and it's so much fun to play.
Yeah, it's fun to listen to.
Now I bet everybody like me is wildly curious about what is the other one. We're tantalized by this mystery.
The Jester that Clarice wrote is just one of my favorites. Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit, Clarice?
Because we all become little kids, right? I think we wrote this together. I came with an idea. Nothing is actually written. It is the only piece in the entire program that is not written with musical notes. Everything else is meticulously written, and this one is not. It's an organized improvisation, and I kind of embody the Jester in a way that, as if I was this really first-rated music director who was trying to gather a band to play with me. And of course, they are my band, right? Third Percussion, and my father became the band. And it's all done on the spot. We have few key elements that we had agreed on. This is supposed to happen. Then after that, that's supposed to happen. Whatever happens, happens, right, David? I'm not explaining it very well. I guess it's hard for me to explain this one because
it's trickstery.
Yeah, I guess so. It is funny. It's supposed to do with, it's comical, and sometimes the audience, when there is an audience, they get involved as well in making part of this group. But it's one of the fun ones, definitely. It breaks the seriousness of the rest of the program,
One of the qualities that's universal to the Jester or the Fool is this unprecedented trust. So if you think about the Fool, the tarot card, he's one step more, he's going to be over the ledge.
Yeah.
But something is still lighthearted about him. Something is looking up at the horizon. We somehow have a sense that he's going to survive this next step. So that spirit of trusting and not knowing.
Wow, you're amazing. I'm amazing. It made me remember something that, when I first came to the group with this idea, let's stage this and let's make people laugh. they were terrified.
Oh,
They were like, what? And I had just come from a tour where I was doing a piece for orchestra and audience members. I was like actually conducting the audience. So I was really plugged into that trust, like, I can do this,
Yeah.
you know, that, yeah. And then I just told them, I said that you just have to trust me.
yeah.
Give me your trust and we'll make it
That's
happen.
amazing.
Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
And in a way, that is a way of imaging our relationship to the unconscious generally, that we have to turn a friendly face, that we're not sure what's going to happen. It's not all linear and organized and, set out ahead of time. We have to be willing to go with it.
That's
Whether
good
it's
advice.
the trickster, the lover, a rebel, whatever. But it's surprising. And I think it makes a lot of us sort of distance from it and go, oh, no, I want to know what your plan is first. Versus, okay, I will trust.
David, what is your relationship with that piece?
It's funny to hear you talk about it, Clarice, because I now am remembering. Now I just love it. It's so much fun. But I remember when you first brought it up, feeling not at all afraid of how you could pull it off, but afraid of how I could pull it off. Deborah, what you're saying about sort of what I hear you saying is about like sort of inhibition and how that becomes just a part of everyone's life. You sort of say, it's easy to say, I'm a musician. I don't know anything about Carl Jung. How could I possibly appear on a This Jungian Life podcast? Or to say, I'm a musician, not a comedian. So how could I possibly pull off this funny, improvised audience participation moment on stage and then go back to playing like super highly technical, music? But actually, those are the moments that in some ways connect with the audience the most because they see you making connections across different disciplines. They see you taking chances. And that's something everyone can relate to.
I think anything that we can do to bring Jung's ideas to life, make them relevant, I think they have to be rediscovered by every culture over and over again. And new idioms need to wrap these ideas around. So for you and Clarice and the team to be able to find a way to clothe these concepts in an interesting way, a new way, make them relevant. I mean, that's the secret of keeping these ideas alive.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, like all artists, show us and excite us because of the interaction with the unconscious and the creative well springs of we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And yet they're doing it. And it's tantalizing to us.
That's lovely. I wrote one of the archetypes, the lover that I talked about. But Clarice, you wrote the hero, the rebel, the jester, and the caregiver. And I don't know that there could be 4 more varied archetypes. And it's also just so fascinating that, I think it must be fascinating for an audience member to go through the program and see who wrote what, and just to realize that we, as composers, contain within us these different multitudes,
The archetypes are in all of us.
Yes.
It's incredible. And I think it's, I'm particularly just in awe of you, Clarice, because I really do think each of those pieces is so wonderful. And I think that they all sound like you, but they're all so different. I feel like for us as composers, it was incredible to tap into these areas of our psyche, which is kind of what you do anytime you create, but this was like more intentional in that way, which was so cool.
So great to have that. And your piece, it took me a long time to be able to feel comfortable with it, because like as he was saying, the rhythmic structure is quite complicated.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. It was really good for me. Like it was.
Sorry and thank you.
It's so amazing because like once I see like it can work, it's like wow. And then I remember Sean who was playing with us, Sean Connors, he's like, yes, David's music is like a code you need to crack. Once you crack it, it's great. It's like really seems that way. I remember like one time trying to play it by memory. And then one of you guys said, don't do it.
Do not try this at home.
Don't trust the Jester too much.
And I said, David, what have you done? And David said something I'll never forget. He said, Clarice, love is complicated.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
No, we had so much fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I have a question that needs a bit of a preamble, I think. One of the things that Jung said about the archetypes is that they have a kind of autonomy. So when an archetype gets constellated, it has its own energy and it tends to shape us and shake us and even determine events in the outer world. And we Jungians, we have seen this. I'm thinking about one time I was working with an image and writing a paper about it, and it was actually the image of Gethsemane and so Christ's last night, and I was working with it archetypally, right, and the kind of psychology of that and what that means symbolically. But I got a horrible backache, which sort of resolved after I finished the paper. And another time, a friend of mine was working with the fairy tale Mother Hala, which is a Grimm's tale that involves a kind of nature mother who makes the snowfall. And she had to fly out for her exams in analytic training. And her flight was delayed because there was this giant storm. So we talk about when an archetype gets constellated, it actually infects you in a way. And I'm really curious. Here you guys were rolling up your sleeves and digging into these archetypes and trying to bring them alive. And I'm wondering, did you notice this? Did you notice that any of these archetypes maybe that you were working with or performing, that you felt yourself get infused with some of that energy in some way that was surprising?
I'll say for myself, this is more as a performer than as a composer in this case. But playing Clarice's piece, The Hero, it's just so like bold, and it just kind of makes you feel awesome. And we like it so much that my colleagues and I in Third Coast like it so much that we not only play it when we perform with Clarice and Sergio, but we got Clarice's permission to play a version that's just the four of us. And now we open most of our concerts when it's just the four of us with that piece. And I think it does what you're saying, Lisa, of sort of, it's you get nervous playing. We still get nervous. We've played, thousands of concerts, but every time you get a little bit nervous, it's nice to go out there and sort of manifest some confidence and heroism just to sort of get things started on the right foot. Perfect. I really feel that.
That's amazing. You know what Jim Ginsburg said to me? I don't know if I told you that. He said that was the piece he put on every morning as he was going to his soccer practice. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, okay, thank you very much. That's amazing. makes you feel like a hero, I guess. Yeah, and then that rings true for me definitely in so many of these pieces. I think all of them, like, especially if they're not mine, because I already kind of know what I was going through, and when I wrote them, and there's always like a little nagging voice of like doubt that like, but like playing, for example, Peter's piece, like The Ruler, that is really powerful because the way that he basically silences both the piano and the guitar with the percussion. It's pretty powerful. We start like just guitar, piano, very, very calmly, and then before you know it, by the end of the piece, we have been overruled. You can't even hear us anymore, like push down. So yeah, there's a feeling of it's like giving your power away. Basically, like no matter how loud you try to play, it can never be as powerful as they are. because of the nature of the two instruments, like guitar and piano, and also because of the archetype itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
The writing. So yeah, that's a good example, I think, for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Reese, along this idea of archetypes, and when you were talking about your father bringing this idea forward and the two of you collaborating, you were talking about South American mythology and stories that are very much alive in you. That I had this feeling that some of those myths haunt you a bit, that they kind of inhabit the atmosphere of your relationship with your dad and your family. So I'm wondering if there is a myth or a story that has a lot of heat in it for your psyche that was part of the entryway into this idea.
I really don't know.
Okay.
Also because it came mostly from him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he would be able to answer this question better than me.
Sure.
Yeah, but I was mostly concerned with, as I always am, like, I want to feel connected
Mm-hmm.
to the people I'm working with, the people I'm playing for. There's nothing that, I don't know, bothers me more than feeling a sense of complete alienation from others.
Uh-huh.
I need therapy for that.
But I've been wondering, and you kind of touched on it, if any of the archetypes kind of go in the other direction, because these all seem outward bound. To care, give, to be a hero, to be a jester, a rebel, of archetypes, such as the orphan or sacrifice. Do any go in that kind of direction?
Yeah, Sergio composed an amazing piece called "The Orphan." That is very beautiful and very, without being maudlin, is deeply. You feel a sort of a deep sense of loss, I think. I mean, he described basically trying to write the saddest thing he could, or something. Just imagining someone who's lost those things which are most precious to them.
I'll tell you, like, you have reminded me of something that's interesting now. Of like my father and I, like when we were very young. I mean, I was really a little girl, and I don't know, about maybe 5 years old, and we were at the supermarket, and I couldn't believe that these two kids were outside. They had no home. They had nobody caring for them. They were just like street kids. And that really bothered me. And I wanted to take him home with us. And my father even almost happened. Like, nothing to be like, yeah, he almost took kids from that area home because we felt so bad. So I think that he wrote that piece unconsciously about that, honestly, because that really goes back to what you're saying, Joseph, the dark side of stories that actually happen, that we have. He always remembers that. My dad is not somebody who remembers a lot of stories, It's like lives in the moment very much, but there are some things that he always brings back from the past, and that's one of them. And he even said, this is like about a kid who's looking for a home, he's lost, and finally in the end, he finds a home. It's like so cute. It has a happy ending, but it's really a struggle, like from beginning to end. Yeah, I remember that time. It was very, very hard, growing up in the neighborhood where we grew up.
It speaks to the way the psyche is always trying to work something out, that we have a natural impulse to wholeness and to resolution. So to be haunted by that experience, haunted by that moment, and then to work maybe over many years to find ways to symbolize, to embody that experience, also allows the experience to be observed as an object. And that gives us a little bit of breathing room between something that might have been very painful and something that we can look at and talk about. And this process of allowing the inner contents to become an object that can be related to is central to Jungian analysis. And it has a kind of curative effect.
I'll say it was amazing to be a part of this project with Clarice and Sérgio as individuals, because they're such exceptional artists and musicians and people. But it was also amazing because you've known each other your entire life. And to be dealing with these archetypes, you know, I was bringing what I was bringing, and I've known the other my bandmates for 20 years or so. We all know so much about each other, but at the end of the day, Sérgio and Clarice, just it's of course this is totally deeper level. So to be like unpacking these really sort of deep areas of our psyche in a musical project with two family members, really, really special. It felt special to be a part of.
And who speak different languages too. Like I'm always like, feel like we have to stop ourselves from speaking Portuguese around. It's not nice. You can't expect them to learn Portuguese for us.
We always knew when we were really messing up, because Clarice and Sérgio would just talk to each other in Portuguese, and we'd be like, "Oh gosh, we got to pull it together, guys."
Gonna throw my dad under the bus. Maybe my dad. My dad is so clear whenever he doesn't agree with something. He just like says it, like no, and you stop and you start conducting, and you know, he knows exactly what he wants to hear.
That's true. It's good.
I know. He's hard. I like that.
The spirit of your father is moving through much of this project, and in a way, it captures something of him and allows part of him to live on beyond himself. So there's something about legacy that I think I'm hearing in some of these things, wanting to support him, wanting to encourage him, wanting to make room for this tremendous talent that he wants to make manifest. And you're supportive of that, which seems really significant.
Nice.
David, you were talking about kind of how intimate this project was in terms of composing. Was it more intimate than other projects you've worked on? Was there something about working with archetypes that touched into a deeper level?
I definitely think so, because Third Coast we've written music together before, so that part wasn't new, and we've asked other people to write music for us, so that part wasn't new. But what was new was we sort of chose our archetypes to compose, and Peter brought his in, and it was like, this is at least one significant insight into how Peter views this fundamental ideal of a ruler, or for Rob, the sage, or Sean, the creator. These people, Clarice, I've known you and Sérgio now for 5 years, and it's awesome. But these guys I've known for decades. And so it's always amazing when you know someone so well to have another insight into them. Yeah, just hearing how each composer decided to musically manifest these archetypes made it feel more intimate, perhaps, than other projects. Like we had a project where we were writing music to film, and there's decisions that are made there, but this is almost like putting a stamp on your psyche with a musical statement. So in that sense, I think it was, we had to all be a little bit more vulnerable in creating this music and in trying to bring someone else's image of this archetype to life.
Sure.
A piece of your soul becomes extroverted, and then you have to tolerate people's comments and people staring at it and participating in it. And in many ancient cultures, people felt very strongly about who would receive one of their objects or whether or not they could have a picture taken of themselves. There's this feeling of the soul moving in and out of us as we create things, which I think we have to take seriously. And it is vulnerable.
You reveal a lot more of yourselves when you're drawing from these mythic layers. And which archetypes you each chose is so significant. put yourself out there as a sage or a ruler or a creator.
Yes.
Or a rebel.
Whoa, or a rebel.
Oh my God. It's so funny you say that.
Or the orphan. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. I think that one of the funny things is I didn't know Rob very well. You guys, I just met you, but you have an opinion. You make an opinion of somebody's, personality based on what you see and on the surface, right? And then he writes this really dark, pensive, deep composition that is so challenging and haunting. It's just incredible. I could never imagine that. He's like a little goofy, so sweet, soft. I would never imagine that him coming out of his mind. So, yeah, that says something about first impressions and how wrong you can be about that.
And how much of our psyche is invisible.
Yeah.
Jung would like to use that iceberg metaphor that you see an iceberg and it looks like it's really big, but 90% of it is really under the water. So we certainly experience that about ourselves, but it makes sense that as artists, you would get glimpses to these hidden sides and also have the courage to share that with strangers, which I think is very audacious. I do have a question for you guys, that archetypes can be talked about in a way that's so civilized. We can talk about an archetype and tell a story or reference a film clip. But when the archetypes activate, there can also be something frightening about it, that it can be full of awe or even horrifying. So I'm wondering, as you kept resting into this project, or perhaps with particular pieces of music, were there moments where you felt anxious about being overwhelmed by what's evoked?
That's a really good question. I feel like it's an artist's responsibility, if they can, to push themselves to the point of being overwhelmed by those things which are too fantastic or horrifying or magical to exist in the day-to-day life, so that they can bring the audience along to experience that in real time. And this particular project, it's a cool opportunity to live in that. And it's one of the, of course, this project was conceived and it was premiered in January of 2020. And we were on tour with this project when COVID hit. So we had many performances of this that have been canceled or postponed, unfortunately. I'm looking forward to the chance where we get to play it live again a bunch, because there's also, performing music, especially the kind of music that we wrote for Archetypes, is so interesting, because the first few performances, we're trying to embody this, but we're also just trying to not mess up.
Oh, gosh.
So you're sort of splitting your brain in two.
Yep.
And simultaneously embodying this deeper part of your psyche, which isn't about concentrating, but also keeping that part of your brain going. But the more we play it, I know the more we'll be able to really live in that space of all that just intangible stuff that I think is really special about music without lyrics, Because one thing that we've said about this project, which I think is really true, is that the archetypes are so universal, and yet they also mean slightly different things to different people.
Oh, yes.
So when we perform The Rebel, I'm sure that there are people in the audience who hear it and are aligned in some ways with exactly what you had in mind, Clarice. And there are people who are hearing other things and associating that with rebellion that you probably didn't intend. And I think that that's a beautiful thing about music, is that it can mean something different to different people without losing any of its value. And it just rhymes so well with this sort of idea of archetypes to me, because, and this goes back to, again, how I was conceiving of the archetype that I wrote, but I think that all of these archetypes are universal, but they also, they somehow are both. They're universal and highly individual.
Archetypes are sort of like the underground water table they're universal, but then as streams or fountains or wells pop up in different places, they manifest very differently in different people.
That's a beautiful image, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's even just interesting to think about if we had shuffled the deck. Maybe we'll do this we've talked about maybe like an archetypes chapter 2. We could mix it all up and each write a different one of the 12 archetypes or choose new ones or something.
I know there are plenty to go around.
Okay.
Yes.
For volume 2.
Volume 2. Yes.
Clarice, I'm also wondering from your perspective if you brushed against anything that felt dangerous as you were unpacking these archetypes, finding what you needed to find in you.
It manifested itself in fear, like of not being able to play, like really, for example, exactly what had been given to me. These guys can play anything you put in front of them. And I am not classically trained, especially as a performer. And I've always taken a lot of liberty. And then having music written, handed to me, was scary. Like some of them like really made me doubt, my capabilities. And it was tense for a while to get around that. So it wasn't really about maybe the piece like that was given me to play, but the fact that it awoke a lot of, I think one of them I said like, no, I'd rather not play on this one. I don't think I can do a good job. And I'd rather just use my voice than improvise. And fine, it was okay. It was like with the stage. I guess I'm afraid of the stage. I didn't know that until today.
Yeah, so you were dealing with things that were a bit unknown or kind of on the edge of what you were comfortable with.
Yeah, take me out of my comfort zone. But, to have also the humility to say, look, I might not be the perfect person to do this. Moment, there are better people to do that, to step in and take this part, which is also something that's important to be willing to do. It's just like, let it go, let people do what they can do. If you can't, just step aside and do something that you can do very well.
That speaks to how we are all fascinated by vulnerability. And even if we can't find vulnerability in ourselves, to see a performer carry that vulnerability, which we sense whether or not it's being spoken to, allows something to be kind of riveting. When a performer is doing something that's psycho-spiritually dangerous, you kind of can't take your eyes off them. You have the sense that something is actually happening on the stage. It's not just being repeated. I think that's central to all the performing arts, and we can really tell the difference when something's just being repeated and when something dangerous, excitingly dangerous, is happening on stage.
And it's also heroic, which is one of the pieces one of the archetypes you chose.
I think Clarice is very heroic.
Thank you. Thank you.
How did you choose these 12? What was that process?
Well, I looked for two things, I think. One of them was I wanted to be a little coherent with there are too many archetypes, right? There are so many out there. And I remember running into this book where they listed over like 1,000. It was like, that's insane. That's too much. And I finally came to a short list. I like the number 12 for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And consistently, I found the same 12 archetypes from many different sources.
Okay.
In books and talking to some people also, like they came as different names. There were different names for the same thing, like the explorer, or it was called something else. I don't recall, but it was the same thing. The essence was the same. So I kept running into the same things with different names, and they were all under the number 12. And I thought that's got to be I think this is somehow right. It feels right. And then they said, also fits very well for a concert and and an album and all of that. So yeah, I guess I just looked for something that would be also different in nature. So having the orphan and also the caregiver.
Sure.
And then you go all the way to the other side and do something like a hero or a rebel, right? And something funny, the Jester, the magician is also there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it covers a lot of different personalities and stories.
A lot of different facets.
Right? Yeah, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
It will never enough, though. It'll never be enough.
One of the things that I've often experienced is that in the beginning of a creative project, it seems like you're making decisions. And then sometimes at the end of the project, you can come to the feeling that the archetypes actually chose you, claimed you, marked you. And in a sense, as each of you have composed the piece, changed you.
Absolutely.
Which I think Lisa was talking about earlier on, about the effect of the archetypal field. Jung felt
we took the tests too, right? Mm-hmm. The online quizzes.
It's an online test of which archetype are you? Or?
Yeah, of course we had to do that for fun.
So you have to tell us.
Yeah.
What did the test say your dominant archetype was?
Oh my goodness, I was the explorer.
I can see that.
That came out for me. What about you, David? I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I need to take it again.
I think you were the sage.
No way. Maybe I cheated on the test and got the sage.
That would make you the Jester.
Exactly. Yeah, the Jester can't ever actually get the test to say that they're the Jester because they would have put, like they wouldn't have been honest on the test, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, Lisa, what's been going on about your book?
Well, it was released on May 25th and sales have been strong. And I've been receiving so many lovely emails and texts and phone calls from friends and from people that I don't know telling me how much they've enjoyed the book. And so that feels really great. The reviews on Amazon have all been glowing and that's been really heartening. It's just really wonderful to know that this project of mine is resonating with so many people.
I'm just so happy for you, and it's such a lovely, lovely book, both deep and accessible, about the inner journey around being a mother. That's never been written about. It hasn't been out there, and that it's getting such an enthusiastic, heartfelt reception. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I would love it if listeners who've read the book could write a review on Amazon because although there are many wonderful ones there, more is always better. So thanks in advance for that.
You've really incarnated something that was in the ethers, but needed to be pulled down, needed to be shaped in words, and needed to be made accessible. And proof in the pudding is that it's beginning to have a kind of life of its own in the collective.
Yes.
That speaks a lot to the timeliness of this.
Yeah, I think you're right, Joseph.
The analogy to a baby is just too rich and too good and too multifaceted to be missed. It's having a life of its own, which is just what we want.
That's right.
I'd like to just put on the table, as we have a little bit of time left, if either of you would like to bring forward a dream. And as we do on our podcast, This Jungian Life, we often will talk about a dream and offer some insights or explore that. I wonder if either of you is feeling comfortable with that.
David, I really want to hear about that dream of yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was sharing this just before we went live. I had a dream recently where I was at an airport for work to go somewhere to play some music. And I was a little bit disoriented anyway. But then I went to get onto, of course, what I thought would be an airplane. But instead of airplanes, they had single passenger submarines. And I got in my submarine after getting lost. And I realized that I was supposed to pilot the submarine myself. And I had no idea how to do that. But it was clear from whoever else was with me in the dream, or from the feeling in the dream, that I should know how to pilot the submarine. And I didn't, and it was terrifying, because not only the sort of anxiety of not knowing something I should know, but also just this feeling of like imminent danger as I was going to pilot a submarine myself for the first time to get somewhere that I needed to be.
Well, that sounds like a classic midlife dream.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm having a midlife crisis, guys.
I didn't say crisis. But one of the things that Jung said is that we spend the first half of life, establishing ourselves in a career and creating a family and kind of focusing on life out there. And then in midlife, the energy tends to turn inward, and we start looking at ourselves and wondering what things maybe have not been developed in us so far. In other words, instead of kind of going up into the clear blue yonder, we might be going down and in. And it's interesting that your path seems to be taking you that way now, at least in the dream. Mm-hmm. And there's some fear of like, whoa, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this. And it does feel like that. If, I'm obviously, David, I don't know much about your life situation or your psyche. So I'm really just kind of riffing and having fun with the dream material that you've brought us. But that when we do turn inward and start a different kind of journey, it can be very disorienting.
Yeah. And we don't know how. It's new. And oftentimes I think our egos say, well, you should know how to do this. Come on now. Just take hold and make sure it happens. And it just feels like exactly that kind of precarious, oh my gosh, ego goes, I don't know how to do it. And something else says, but here you are in your submarine. And I'm also thinking about how it reflects the process we've been talking about tonight of all of you collaborating and holding so much material, your creative expertise and collaborating, and these very resonant, powerful archetypes that you were working with. Did you really know how to do it all right from the start?
Yeah. There was a lot of vulnerability. Yeah. I mean, you were talking about your own, Clarice, but I mean, for us, all the improvisation moments and Jester and lots of that.
I'm struck in your dream also that even though you were surprised by being escorted to your private submarine, but some part of your psyche had constructed that already. So even though diving into the depths may feel strange or you don't feel prepared, some other part of you has been preparing meticulously to be able to introduce you to the water and is providing safe passage. Some people have dreams where they're just kind of tossed out of an airplane into a stormy sea, and then they're just kind of flailing. But
right, you have a submarine.
You've got a submarine, which means to me that you have thoughts and concepts, and that you have a sense of self that can allow you to go into these tumultuous waters without drowning psychologically or without being overwhelmed. So I think that speaks well of how you were raised, because we often inherit certain structures from our upbringing that allow us to have a certain kind of resilience. And it speaks well to your general preparation. So now the challenge is, are you going to take the journey? Are you going to go as deep as you can? Because you could turn the sub around and just be like, I'm out of here. Just go back to the dock.
The other thing that's interesting about it is it's an individual submarine, and that inner journey is more individual and not collective. Like, we're not riding on the plane with 400 other people. This is just our journey in the second half of life.
Yeah. And there's an attitude that we often say where the least trustworthy attitude in the dream is that of the dream ego, the sense of yourself in the dream. It's a sort of like, oh my God, what? I don't want to do this. But as Joseph said, the submarine is there already. It has been prepared and it's waiting for you.
This is awesome. I'm going to call you guys every time I have a dream.
Same way.
Well, you can submit your dream to the podcast.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I am having the feeling that we are coming to a conclusion here at 9:00. So I'm wondering if anybody has any closing thoughts, or something I'm always interested in after we have a collaborative discussion is to go inside and to just describe what's been evoked by the conversation, by us coming together. And I know for me, what's evoked is a tremendous amount of warmth for both of you, David and Clarice. There's a way that you bring yourself forward and a way that you communicate how joyous it is for you to be in this profession that really comes across and kind of delights me.
That's really nice to hear. I am struck by how there were so many layers to this project that I had conceived of, and yet there are still so many more layers deeper to continue exploring. And that makes me very happy, because my favorite art to consume is the art that you can see again and again and again, or listen to again and again and again, and find something new every time.
Yeah. For me, I think excitement about like wanting to know a lot more about this, because just hearing the three of you talk about it is fascinating. So just 10,000 times more curious. And then I also wanted to tease David and send him the Beatles song, Yellow Submarine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
It is.
I've really been very, really deeply involved and touched, which shows, I think, exactly the processes we've been talking about all evening, of how when there are depths in common, it can go that way, and that what you do has so many parallels to what we do. Of putting yourselves out there and daring the deeps and appreciating what psyche has to offer. And we try to do it in a different way, but it's kind of theme and variations.
And I'm aware that both of you, to a certain extent, but especially you, David, were a little apologetic, like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know much about Jung. You know, you guys are the experts." But I always feel when I'm talking with someone who's, you know, quote unquote, not an expert about Jung, I feel like saying, no, don't say that, because this is it's just true for all of us. And there isn't something big that separates me from you when we're in this realm. And I want to share it with you without this kind of artificial, you know, I'm the expert kind of thing. You know, it's like we're all playing with these ideas together, and these ideas are for everyone. So I really enjoyed doing that with you tonight.
Yeah. And you know.
Yes, that's right.
So in closing, I'd like to thank the Chicago Humanities Festival for bringing us all together so that we could meet each other, get to know each other a little bit better, and get to enjoy the camaraderie of this creative spirit. So thanks to all of you at the Chicago Humanities Festival, and good night.
You've been listening to This Jungian Life. From our website, thisjungianlife.com, you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, help us produce future episodes by funding us through Patreon, and submit your dreams for possible interpretation on another episode. We'd like to thank our listener who shared a dream for today's show, and hope you'll let us know what topics you'd enjoy hearing more about. Until next time, keep living this Jungian life.